Welcome, dear listeners, to History with Herodotus, where we delve into the vast expanse of human experience, uncovering the hidden patterns and profound lessons that shape our understanding of the world. Today, we embark on a journey to explore one of the most pivotal and devastating conflicts in modern history, the Battle of Passchendaele. This brutal and transformative event, which took place during the Great War, has left an indelible mark on the collective memory of humanity. The region's fertile soil and rolling hills had been a battleground for centuries, with various empires and armies clashing in a struggle for dominance. In the early 20th century, the area was a tranquil haven, with picturesque villages and bustling towns, such as Ypres and Passchendaele, nestled among the fields and forests. However, with the outbreak of World War I in August 1914, the region was thrust into the midst of chaos. The German army, under the command of General Erich Ludendorff, had launched a surprise attack on neutral Belgium, seeking to outflank the French army and capture the strategic ports of the English Channel. The British Expeditionary Force, BEFF, led by Field Marshal John French, was hastily deployed to support the Belgian army and defend the region against the German onslaught. As the war dragged on, the Western Front became a stalemate, with both sides dug in behind elaborate networks of trenches and fortifications. The British and French armies launched a series of costly attacks, including the ill-fated Battle of the Somme in 1916, which resulted in staggering losses on both sides. Despite these setbacks, General Douglas Haig, who had succeeded Field Marshal French as commander of the BEF, remained convinced that a decisive victory could be won through sheer force of numbers and artillery firepower. In the spring of 1917, Haig began planning a major offensive in Flanders, aimed at breaking through the German lines and capturing the strategic ports of Ostend and Zeebrugge. The Germans, anticipating an attack, had been busy fortifying their positions, constructing a complex network of trenches, bunkers, and strong points. They had also developed innovative defensive tactics, including the use of pillbox, machine gun nests, which would prove devastatingly effective against Allied infantry. The British had assembled a massive force, comprising over 200,000 troops, supported by thousands of guns and artillery pieces. The Germans, meanwhile, had fortified their positions with barbed wire, machine guns, and concrete bunkers, preparing to face the coming onslaught. On July 31, 1917, the British launched a massive artillery barrage, unleashing over 3 million shells onto the German positions. The earth shook, and the skies filled with smoke and fire, as the very fabric of reality seemed to be torn apart. The origins of the Battle of Passchendaele are complex and multifaceted, involving the intricate web of alliances and rivalries that characterized the early 20th century. The battle was not simply a clash of arms, but a culmination of years of diplomatic tension, military buildup, and strategic maneuvering. As the battle raged on, the landscape of Flanders was transformed into a nightmarish realm of mud, blood, and steel. The Germans had fortified their positions with barbed wire, machine guns, and concrete bunkers, making it nearly impossible for the British to make significant gains. Despite being outnumbered, the German army held its ground, inflicting heavy casualties on the advancing British troops. One of the most notable aspects of the Battle of Passchendaele was the introduction of new military tactics and technologies. The Germans employed a tactic known as defense in depth, where they created a series of layered defensive positions, each one designed to funnel the enemy into killing zones. This tactic proved devastatingly effective against the British, who were unable to overcome the German defenses. The British, on the other hand, introduced the use of tanks, which were still in their infancy at the time. The first tank attack took place on September 15, 1917, when a group of Mark IV tanks supported an infantry advance near the village of St. Julien. Although the tanks showed promise, they were ultimately unable to break through the German lines due to the treacherous terrain and mechanical failures. As the battle dragged on, the conditions for the soldiers became increasingly dire. The mud and waterlogged terrain made every step a struggle, and the stench of death and decay hung in the air. The British and German armies suffered staggering losses, with estimates suggesting that over 400,000 casualties occurred during the battle. Despite these challenges, the British continued to push forward, driven by the determination of General Douglas Haig to achieve a decisive victory. On October 4, 1917, the British launched a major assault on the village of Broodseinde, which was heavily fortified by the Germans. The attack was preceded by a massive artillery barrage, which pounded the German positions with over 1 million shells. The battle for Broodseinde was one of the most intense and brutal fights of the entire conflict. The British infantry advanced behind a creeping barrage, but were cut down in droves by the German machine guns. Despite suffering heavy losses, the British managed to capture the village, but at a terrible cost. As the battle finally began to subside in November 1917, the British had achieved a Pyrrhic victory, having captured the village of Passchendaele, but at a staggering cost in lives and resources. The German army, although battered and bruised, remained intact, and the strategic objectives of the battle had not been achieved. The Battle of Passchendaele marked a turning point in the war, as both sides began to realize that the conflict would not be won through a single decisive battle. Instead, it would be a long and bloody slog, with each side seeking to wear the other down through attrition. The bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers on both sides will never be forgotten, and their legacy continues to shape our understanding of the world today. As the battle subsided in November 1917, the British had achieved a costly victory, capturing the village of Passchendaele, but at a staggering cost in lives and resources. The German army, although battered and bruised, remained intact, and the strategic objectives of the battle had not been achieved. The human cost of the Battle of Passchendaele was devastating, with estimates suggesting that over 400,000 casualties occurred during the conflict. The British suffered approximately 275,000 casualties, while the Germans lost around 200,000 men. The sheer scale of the losses was a sobering reminder of the brutal nature of modern warfare. In the aftermath of the battle, both sides began to reassess their strategies and tactics. The British realized that the war would not be won through a single decisive battle, but rather through a long and bloody slog, with each side seeking to wear the other down through attrition. This realization led to a shift in British strategy as they began to focus on wearing down the German army through a series of smaller, more targeted attacks. The Germans, on the other hand, were forced to confront the reality of their own vulnerabilities. The Battle of Passchendaele had exposed weaknesses in their defensive tactics, and they began to develop new strategies to counter the British advances. The Germans also increased their use of mustard gas, which had been introduced during the battle, and developed more effective countermeasures against British tanks. The impact of the Battle of Passchendaele was not limited to the military sphere. The conflict had a profound impact on the home front, as news of the staggering losses and brutal conditions filtered back to Britain and Germany. The battle marked a turning point in public opinion, as many began to question the wisdom of continuing the war. In Britain, the Battle of Passchendaele led to increased criticism of the government's handling of the war effort. The Liberal Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, faced growing pressure to reform his government and adopt more effective strategies for winning the war. In Germany, the battle contributed to growing unrest and dissatisfaction with the war effort, as many began to demand an end to the conflict. The legacy of the Battle of Passchendaele can be seen in the modern concept of total war, where entire societies are mobilized to support the war effort. The battle marked a turning point in the development of modern warfare, as armies began to recognize the importance of combined arms tactics, where infantry, artillery, and air power were coordinated to achieve strategic objectives. The bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers on both sides will never be forgotten, and their legacy continues to shape our understanding of the world today. In conclusion, the aftermath of the Battle of Passchendaele marked a significant turning point in World War I, as both sides began to reassess their strategies and tactics. The conflict had a profound impact on the course of the war, leading to a shift in British strategy and a reevaluation of German defensive tactics. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.